Hi, I'm Lauren Weingarten, and I'm so happy to be with you today. I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So before I present my official talk, I want to introduce three W's and what I call the what is Inhotim, where is Inhotim, why is Inhotim. So I'm going to share my screen with you now. Let's see, there you go. And let's see where this takes us. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to close that down. I'll start. So here are the bare facts. What is Inhotim? Inhotim is an outdoor museum of contemporary art and botanical garden. It was founded by the former mining magnate Bernardo Paz in 2004 to house his personal art collection, and it opened to the public in 2006. In 2008, Inhotim was recognized as a civil society organization of public interest by the government of Minas Gerais. Today, around 700 works by more than 60 artists from almost 40 countries are exhibited outdoors and in galleries amidst a botanical garden with more than 4,300 rare botanical species from all continents. Trying to adjust my vision here. All right, where is Inhotim? Where is Inhotim? Map-wise, Inhotim is located in Brumadinho, 37 miles from Belo Horizonte, which is the capital of Minas Gerais. Geographically, Inhotim is located within Brazil's mountainous forestry and iron mining region. Its privileged location between the rich biomes of the Atlantic forest and the Cerrado made it possible for Inhotim to develop a botanical garden. The Institute has a total of 3 square miles, of which 1.7 miles are marked as preservation areas, and 0.5 square miles is designated as part of the private reserve of natural heritage. Within this expanse, art galleries are embedded within the lush botanical gardens and the native landscapes that comprise the 1 square mile of visitors' access, providing a unique experience that mixes art and nature. Why is Inhotim? How did Inhotim land here? In the 1980s, Bernardo Paz began buying tracts of land surrounding his modest farmhouse, which is part of an original farmstead, as developers threatened to destroy the natural landscape. The farm had originally been named by locals after a former owner, an English engineer known as Senor Tim, and in the Minas Gerais dialect, it sounded like Inhotim. Having acquired the land, Paz soon converted the then 3,000 acres or 4.5 square miles ranch into a sprawling botanical garden, which was originally 1 square mile. And he was inspired by his friend, the modernist landscape artist, Roberto Burle Marx. The Inhotim Museum project began when Brazilian multimedia artist Tunga persuaded Bernardo Paz to start collecting contemporary art, which eventually allowed artists all the space and resources they needed to create larger than life works, which we call installation artworks. These two outside influencers, Burle Marx and Tunga, figure as my starting point. We're addressing the conference theme of nature and tracing Inhotim's aesthetic program for uniting art and nature. In this conference light, I have amended my presentation title, and it goes as follows: Naturalizing and Reframing Contemporary Installation Art at Inhotim. I have organized my presentation in 3 parts. Part 1 reviews the history of Inhotim and its original museum in a garden aesthetic. I call this phase Inhotim's curatorial aesthetic turn or trope. Part 2 examines the installation artworks designed or curated to harmonize or dialogue with nature. In conclusion, I offer a critical reflection on Inhotim's more recent ecological turn, a turn already highlighted in some installation artworks, but currently celebrated by art critics and scholars' perspectives. Inhotim's exhibition planning and its digital platform on Google Arts and Culture. From the inception of Bernardo Paz's development of Inhotim, landscape design was at the forefront of the owner's plans. Paz was friends with Burle Marx between 1987 to 89, who was the father of modern Brazilian landscape design. During Burle Marx's occasional visits to the farmstead, the designer introduced Paz to many new plant species and influenced the design of the gardens around the house, which had been initiated by Pedro Nering Cesar. And here is the guide map to the entire visitors' access. And first of all, I want you to notice the square that I've marked off here. This was the original house and farmstead, and the botanical gardens started in this area. And then we'll see the first artist pavilion, which is Tunga's True Rouge. And then notice too, because I'm not going to show this again, the meandering paths. These are all the different paths one can take to access the different art pavilions or galleries throughout the 1 square mile that is accessible to the visitors. So while landscape architect Luis Carlos Orsini realized Inhotim's current design, as you can see on the left, Burle Marx's style endures in both the details and the overall plan, most markedly by these serpentine paths, which I'll get to in a moment. Also a prominent painter and graphic artist aligned with the mid-century avant-garde, Burle Marx translated the abstract organic elements of his painting into the meandering paths of his landscape design, compelling the eye to rove freely and giving the body an imaginative and sensory ubiquity. And this is seen in his more popular, famous Copacabana promenade in Rio de Janeiro, and at his own home and residence outside of Rio, which is now a museum and a landscape preserve. As seen in Inhotim, this dynamic of curving lines is manifested in serpentine walking paths, along which the visitor encounters changing vistas of a diversely colored scale, amassed and patterned foliage. In this setting, the museum visitor freely chooses among the meandering paths that lead to unexpected encounters with freestanding artworks and installation art pavilions. Paz's friendship with Brazilian multimedia artist Tunga was also a critical turning point toward Inhotim's reconfiguration as a contemporary art paradise. Paz befriended Tunga in the late 1990s, at which time Paz's exposure to Tunga's installation artwork, True Rouge, which I'll show you more of as we progress, of 1997, caused an epiphany that led Paz to focus exclusively on collecting contemporary art, especially installation art. To note, installation art is defined as an immersive environment, usually enclosed within a single gallery space. Tunga, in response to Paz being having an epiphany when he saw True Rouge, donated the artwork, True Rouge, in 1998 to the fledgling museum collection. During the next decade, Paz's ambitions for Inhotim expanded exponentially. His collection holdings outgrew his residential confines. He engaged Tunga as his art advisor, and he converted his private collection into a public museum. Once established as a public museum, Tunga's advisory role was replaced with professional and world-renowned curators and art administrators. By the late 1990s, Paz's Inhotim property had become a fully developed botanical garden, which I had pointed out to you on that map guide to the museum. And it was in this setting that Paz built the first freestanding building specifically to house Tunga's True Rouge installation artwork. Named Galleria True Rouge, the glass pavilion is nestled within a verdant clearing with its own reflecting pond. Completed in 2003, this nexus of art, architecture, and landscape became the museum's template for exhibiting all future art acquisitions. The Galleria True Rouge complex also exemplifies how Earl Marx's landscape design philosophy was foundational to the aesthetic trope that shaped curatorial practices. In this context, nature was framed as aesthetic because it was the stage for unifying art, architecture, and landscape design. Given its exemplary status, I now analyze Galleria True Rouge complex as demonstrating the curatorial practice of naturalizing contemporary installation art. Designed by Paolo Orsini in consultation with the artist Tunga, Galleria True Rouge was conceived as a garden pavilion in the minimalist vocabulary that recalls the international style of the 1920s and 30s. The building is comprised of a broad horizontal cantilevered roof with a raised attic supported by a double row of 4 cylindrical piers. The first set of piers defines an open terrace, while the second set frames floor-to-ceiling glass panels of the enclosing walls. The simple geometric lines and glass surfaces perfectly harmonize with the natural setting. The serpentine concrete ramp that leads to the entrance continues the lines of the pathway inscribed in the garden landscape. Located on the first of 4 artificial lakes, the building creates a constantly changing dialogue with its reflections. Equally compelling, the composition, matrix, and motion of Tunga's True Rouge artwork extend the organic contours and incessant changes of the natural setting. Here, Tunga uses nets, wood, blown glass, glass beads, red paint, sea sponges, snooker balls, bottle cleaner brushes, felt and crystal balls to create a constantly changing dynamic between all the parts. Like marionettes, the apparatus is suspended from the ceiling by crisscrossed wooden brackets. Oh, sorry. Oops. By crisscrossed wooden brackets, echoing the way leaves are suspended up by the branches and boughs of the trees outside. Inside each suspended glass vessel, there is a red liquid that, depending on its tilt, pours into the other containers. Originally set into motion by naked bodies choreographed for a performance piece, the apparatus is now activated by the very presence of individual visitors, setting in motion the infinitely random changes between its constituent parts. No less important, while situated in the glass enclosed pavilion interior, the visitor is alternately immersed in the artwork and the outside vistas. I now want to discuss three other artist pavilions that formed Inhotim's foundational installation art collection, and which embody the curatorial execution of the art plus nature's aesthetic trope. The artists I survey here are Brazilian, Adriana Barrejo, Sildo Morales, and Elio Oiticica. And just as a note, I'm not skilled in the Portuguese language, but the transcription by our translators will help you see the correct pronunciation. In any case, among these three artists, only one work was designed for Inhotim. The others were either imported from other sites or constructed posthumously. The relationship of the Adriana Varejao gallery to nature is more controlled and abstract than the Gallery of True Rouge, designed by Rodrigo Cervano Lopez in 2005. Here, the structure is a concrete block set back into a natural slope and cantilevered, appearing as if it is suspended in the air. The entrance is also set back into the block, but is continuous with a floating pavilion, floating platform into an adjacent pool. As with the Tunga Pavilion, the building mass is reflected on the water surface, but here the reflection enhances the weightless floating appearance of the building mass. The fortress-like appearance is also contradicted once the visitor enters the building's interior. Hand-painted tiles line the interior walls, illuminated by the natural light that shines through the open ramps, stairways, and a balcony exposed to the sky. At the uppermost level, a ramp leads to the terrace garden, situated at the height of the trees and exposing a panoramic view of the surrounding landscape. So this is the rear of the building that you saw the front of, suspended over the lake. While Varejo's tiled walls invoke histories of Portuguese colonialism, inviting word and image analyses, her tiled benches speak directly to our nature theme, representing plants and birds native to the local region, global ecosystems, and the Amazon rainforest. Panacea Fantastica, originally created in 2003, covers a bench by the gallery entrance, and we saw this at the beginning. The tiles portray 50 types of mind-altering plants from different parts of the world as some sort of botanical catalog. One of the tiles bears a text suggesting the relation between hallucinogenic effects of plants and the ensuing shift of perception of what surrounds us. And in this case, I can personally testify that these same hallucinogenic effects can be experienced while navigating Inhotim's circuitous paths of artworks in the garden. The tile benches of the gallery's rooftop terrace, titled Parasinhos, or little birds, from Inhotim to Dimini, which originated in 2004, here installed in 2008. The original set of tiles resulted from the artist's experience at the Watoriki village in the region of the Dimini River, an indigenous territory of the Yanomami people. In the Inhotim version, Verraggio added representations of species typical of the Brumadinho region, based on a collaborative research project with the Inhotim Botanical Garden staff. When Inhotim opened to invited guests in 2004, the museum complex consisted of 3 buildings, one devoted to exhibits from the collection and 2 single artist pavilions, as well as numerous sculptures placed throughout the tropical gardens. In addition to the Galleria Rouge, the second pavilion was dedicated to the installation artworks of Cildo Morellis. Like Tunga, Morellis is a multimedia artist who also advised Paz's collecting activities in the 1990s. The Galleria Cildo Morellis was also designed by architect Paolo Orsini, but with different effects than Tunga's glass pavilion. Instead, it presents a windowless, minimalist white volume comprised of a rectangle and half cylinder. It too is nestled within the surrounding foliage. While the Morellis Gallery houses the most notorious installation works by Morellis, including the Globetrotter, Redshift, and a travers or through, the pavilion is closed off from the landscape, allowing each installation to occupy a separate space and retain the integrity of their immersive effects. And this is the traditional way of exhibiting installation artworks. Although our conference theme prevents me from introducing you to each of these works, a former Inhotim staff member informed me that a travers or through was originally installed in an open air pavilion and later installed in the current building for conservation reasons. That being the case, I briefly described the indoor installation so that we can imagine a more naturalized version at Inhotim. A travers is comprised of variously textured and assembled screens arranged in a 15 by 15 meter square labyrinth. As such, Morelli's installation offers the viewer an excursion through a shifting sequence of screens that alternate between transparency and semi-transparency, comprised of railings, wooden gates, metal fences, garden lattices, glass, paper, and plastic dividers, including shower curtains and strings of beads. 2 aquariums are filled with translucent fish, shimmering under gallery lights. The floor of the installation is covered in layers of broken glass shards, making for our unsteady traversal through the labyrinth. Arriving at the center, we confront an enormous ball made up of numerous layers of cellophane paper and tape, illuminated by a suspended industrial light, which you can see here. In the current closed-off setting, the brightly lit center of the labyrinth evokes either spiritual enlightenment or an interrogation room. Now, imagine that if that artificial light mixed with the natural light filtered through the screens and the shimmer on the glass shards. I believe that the installation would have been a more ethereal effect. Transparencies and surface reflections would multiply, and hazy auras and shadows would appear to dissolve the materiality of the semi-opaque screens. Birdsong and rustling foliage would mix with the crunching sound of walking on glass. We may have felt a harmony between art and nature. However, at this point, we can recognize how curatorial and conservationist decisions regarding an artwork's location alter our sensorial experience, here contributing to a purist aesthetic of modern art and its paradoxes. I raised this relocation issue to further interrogate curatorial decisions that better align with Inhotim's aesthetic trope of uniting art and nature. It is in this critical light that I now turn to Helio Wojtysica's Magic Square number 5, an installation artwork perfectly suited to its outdoor setting. However, although Magic Square 5 was constructed posthumously, in this case, curators and Sao Paulo architect Paula Zasnikoff collaborated to construct Magic Square 5 from Wojtysica's Magic Square series of 1977. This series comprised instructions in text, plans, models, and samples, which were intended for a public square and was never built. The Magic Square installation also issues from Wojtysica's Penetrables. Its full title is, and I'll say this in English, Invention of Color, Penetrable Magic Square number 5 Deluxe. The Penetrables series hallmark Wojtysica's contribution to the neo-concrete movement as its leading visual artist. Although the neo-concrete group officially disbanded in 1961, Wojtysica continued to develop his series of penetrables, or in Portuguese, penetravels. According to the artist, penetrables were to be, quote, penetrated by the viewer so that, again, in his words, color becomes purely aesthetic in the sense of a heightened experience, unquote. In this series, Wojtysica realized his philosophy of, quote, blazing the trail for a painting of pure color, space, time, and structure, unquote. In one series of penetrables called Parangalas, Wojtysica engaged local performers from Rio's favelas to wear or carry capes, flags, and banners made from layers of painted fabric while dancing to the rhythm of samba. In another penetrable called Tropicalia of 1967, Wojtysica constructed installation ensembles of tents or shacks made from layers of painted fabric, together with plastic, mats, screens, ropes, and other found materials. At Inhotim, a series of 4 immersive participatory installation artworks titled Cosmococo are enshrined in a fortress-like 4-room gallery of that name. Here again, I can only titillate you to visit these rooms on your own by way of a single installation titled Cosmococo 5 Hendrix War. In this Cosmococo series, conceived in 1973, multicolored hammocks, mattresses, bouncing balls, and an indoor pool distinguish each of the 4 installations. The room's walls and ceilings are animated with what he called quasi-cinemas, Wojtysica's homemade hallucinogenic films that flicker with popular culture icons and pulsate with Jimi Hendrix music. As realized at Inhotim, Wojtysica's Magic Square number 5 presents an immersive color experience on an architectural scale, comprised of 9 cement walls, acrylic paint, wire fencing, and glass. The title Magic Square invokes the marriage between the social and aesthetic spheres, suggesting the concept of an open-air plaza, but also the geometric configuration of a cube. However, in these ensembles, the planes and 90-degree angles of the cube are imploded from within, forming both closed corners and open corridors that invite visitors to gather, pass through, self-isolate, play, or simply wonder at the color spectacle on display. As a continuation of Wojtysica's Penetrables and Tropicalia, the color planes of Magic Square become the canvas support for human engagement, bringing life to the spaces and colored surfaces. We can now consider how curatorial decisions regarding its construction rendered, sorry about that. Oh, come back. Sorry, let me pause for a moment. and figure out what's going on with my PowerPoint. Okay, okay, I'm back. Share screen. Okay. Okay, here we go. So anyway, here we are back at the screen. Let's see. Okay, so we can now consider how curatorial decisions regarding the construction regarding its construction rendered Oiticica's magic square the epitome of the art plus nature aesthetic. As such, the artwork has become Inhotim's iconic image in the public sphere, as evidenced by the numerous popular press and scholarly articles that feature the magic square as their lead image. This makes perfect aesthetic sense, given the curatorial decisions that enhance the harmonious relation between art and nature. Located in a verdant clearing surrounded by majestic palm trees, the structure's brilliantly colored wall planes create a complementary color contrast of color and texture with its setting. Inhotim's curators advertise their own museological achievement in their description of Magic Square on their website. Quote, the presence of natural light and the gradations during the day completes the work, modifying it at every moment. Unquote. Thus far, I have foregrounded the Brazilian artist whose works form the foundation of Inhotim's museum collection. In doing so, I teased out the aesthetic trope that unifies art, nature, and architecture. Simultaneously, I've teased out a Brazilian modernist trope that foregrounds an immersive aesthetic experience. Thanks to Burle Marx's, Tunga's, and Morelli's early interventions in the formation of Inhotim's museum, these two tropes converge as an experiential aesthetic immersion within a garden setting. It is this dynamic interaction that makes Inhotim a unique and specifically Brazilian museum experience. I will now survey subsequent additions to the contemporary installation art collection with which curators advanced, albeit refined, the experiential nature plus art model. I call this next section continuing the art plus nature legacy curatorial interventions. I survey these works along three sometimes intersecting axes: mirroring nature, artworks that use mirrors or reflecting surfaces to capture the surrounding landscape; site-specific art, artworks created to exist within Inhotim's landscape using natural materials from the region. And this is as opposed to completed works transferred from other venues. And then lastly, eco-critical creations, artworks that address our exploitive relationship with the land, and particularly with Minas Gerais' forestry and mining district. Part 2A, mirroring nature. Dan Graham's bisected triangle interior curve of 2002 was originally designed for and installed in Madison Square Park, New York. It was later transferred and reinstalled in Inhotim's Botanical Garden. Graham's pavilion is a construction of mirrored glass and stainless steel, measuring a little over the average adult height. As the title states, the external triangle structure is bisected by a curved interior partition. In the spirit of Brazilian artists that we've just reviewed, Inhotim's curators placed the work within a clearing to showcase both the lush surroundings and the humans who traverse this terrain. Visitors approach the pavilion located next to a large pond, either by a staircase coming down from the wooded enclosure or through a path. What first appears as a nondescript glass pavilion in the distance is gradually transformed by the visitors who approach and enter it. Whether standing outside or inside the pavilion, the viewer becomes immersed in the kaleidoscopic play of the landscape features and colors reflected on the surfaces. With these infinitely changing spectacles, Graham's glass pavilion activates both the individual's awareness of their own multiple identities and their visceral alliance with nature. And by the way, that's me there and there. Oliver Eliason's viewing machine of 2001 and installed in 2008, was also relocated to Inhotim from its original urban environment. When I first visited Inhotim in 2010, the apparatus was installed within a glass-walled gallery. What a wonderful surprise to discover it outdoors when I returned to Inhotim in 2012. Inhotim curators reinstalled the artwork in a verdant clearing raised upon a hilltop plateau. In this location, the installation not only serves the aesthetic trope of joining art and nature, but as the title suggests, viewing machine confounds the boundaries between art, technology, and nature. Externally, it recalls a telescope, an apparatus for viewing distant vistas, the very function that it serves to view the distant forest and mountain terrain at Inhotim. Yet, as we explore the sculpture, if you want to call it that, by walking around it, we become immersed in the landscape that immediately surrounds us, as it is reflected in the polished stainless steel surfaces of the viewing machine. But this is not all. When we poke our head into and look through the apparatus's narrow end, a different technology comes into play, that of the kaleidoscope. That's me too. As with the original kaleidoscope developed in 1817, Eliason's viewing machine creates an effect of reflected light with 6 internal mirrors forming a hexagonal tube. Rather than capping the kaleidoscopic device with colored glass as you would in a child's toy, Eliason uses the angled mirrors to transform the distant vistas into a dazzling, multifaceted display of variously hued patterns of sky and terrain. Thus, with his kaleidoscope, the viewer creates their own infinitely beautiful shapes by moving the machine toward a point of interest and discovering nature anew. We again recognize the nature plus art alliance upon approaching Velasquez Suarez's Folly of 2005 and installed in 2009. By the way, Suarez was born in Belo Horizonte. First presented at the 2005 Venice Biennale, Folly was reconstructed at Inhotim within a landscape setting that the artist designed in collaboration with the Institute's botanical garden staff. Our approach to Folly begins with a winding flower-lined path along one of the large ponds at Inhotim. From this distance, we begin to see a gazebo-like structure reminiscent of traditional garden decorations built to induce fantasies of exotic places or historical epochs. But as we get closer to Suarez's Folly, we realize that what seemed from the distance to be an open pavilion with a roof supported by slender poles is in fact a closed octagonal building with outer walls covered by mirrors reflecting the landscape. To enter the building, one must step up to and around the raised wooden platform to the door at the back of the structure. So here we see the back of the structure. All the while seeing oneself immersed in nature, because as we walk around, we're always going to see ourselves reflected in the glass. Upon entering the gazebo or the pavilion, the natural order is reversed. Inside, the walls are equally covered by mirrors, but they now dissolve the enclosure with a misty nocturnal glow emitted by the video projections infinitely multiplied on the mirrored walls of an otherwise empty room. The mirrors now serve as support for the screening of a video titled Tonight of 2002, which was Suarez's video portraying people dancing to Burt Bacharach's 1967 song titled The Look of Love. And they are dancing inside the original Pampulha Casino, which is now the Museum of Art at Pampulha, a suburb of Belo Horizonte. Here, the visitor becomes immersed in ephemeral images of dancing figures that move in every direction. Exiting this darkened theatrical space, the visitor readjusts readjusts their vision to the daylit landscape and perhaps contemplates the natural alliance between the lush Brazilian flora and the vibrant bossa nova samba rhythms. The foundational theme of uniting art, architecture, and nature is prominently displayed in the installation of Japanese artist Yayoi Kusama's Narcissus Garden. The project was first realized for the 1966 Venice Biennale and then reconstructed and installed on the rooftop water garden of Inhotim's the Burl Marx Education Center, which was designed by Arquitectos Associado, or Architecture Associates, in 2009. So this shows the building before the Kusama's work was installed. And when I show you the work, I want to remind you that the balls float around the entire roof garden, water garden, I should say. Kusama's Narcissus Garden includes 500 reflective stainless steel balls that float freely among lily pads and other water plants. The architectural design complements the artwork's inside-outside ambiguities. One enters the building by descending the steps of an outdoor amphitheater so that the rooftop that we see now forms a bridge to the upper botanical garden level, becoming coextensive with Inhotim's landscape. Although Kusama originally conceived Narcissus Garden as a critique of the Biennale and contemporary art museums, the naturalization of the artwork erases this earlier critique. Instead, visitors now perform Narcissus' act of gazing at the reflection, not on the pool's surface, but on the ball's surface reflections. The floating balls destabilize our self-image since they constantly move and spread across the pond as the wind changes, or alternately clump together and accumulate into impenetrable masses. As our self-reflection merges with the reflections of the sky, as here, we are reminded of nature's ephemeral beauty, independent of our visage. Next section is called Mirroring Nature as Site-Specific Art. A recent acquisition, Brazilian Cristina Iglesias Vegetation Room of 2010 to 2012, perfectly mirrors Inhotim's aesthetic trope of unifying art and nature, but with nature taking center stage. As a site-specific artwork, this installation was specifically designed for a clearing within Inhotim's forest interior. Although aligned with the labyrinthine constructions of Oiticica's Magic Square and Morelli's Através, our immersive experience is entirely within a verdant terrain. As the title suggests, Vegetation Room evokes a closed garden, a secret paradise, or an abandoned house overtaken by nature. The installation consists of a cube of polished stainless steel reflecting the surrounding forest. And I want you to note these meandering shapes, which define the visitor's passage through the cube, and of course reflects the Burl Marx inspired paths of Inhotim. So the visitor enters the cube's interior, which you can barely see. Here's a visitor inside the cube, and slips through the curving labyrinthine crevices where the walls are lined by sculpted reliefs of foliage. At the cube's center, torrents of water periodically rush forth. Cultivating this immersive experience of nature, Iglesias transports us to an imagined space where materials are used to mislead the spectator. Here, artifice and nature are confounded by mirroring surfaces of foliage, the forest foliage, the sight and sound of artificially rushing water, and sculptured plant life, which altogether heightens our awareness of Inhotim's fantastical staging of dialogues between art and nature. Doug Aitken's Sonic Pavilion is another installation artwork that unites natural sounds and panoramic landscape vistas specific to Inhotim's geological and topographical location. As such, Sonic Pavilion aligns with the site-specific art axis, especially because the artist designed the circular pavilion that is integral to his artwork. As one nears the pavilion from a red brick path, the structure becomes visible above a hilltop. Rich red soil and rocks indigenous to the iron-rich mountain range seem to erupt from the pavilion's foundation as it tumbles down the hillside. Visitors enter the pavilion interior by way of a gently sloping wood ramp that is carved into the hill, and then this ramp then continues to the pavilion's raised platform and spirals around the walls to form bench seating, as you can see here. Once inside the pavilion, we are surrounded by an empty space, glass walls that seem to shroud the landscape in a fog, and unfamiliar erratic sounds. This shrouded effect is purposefully enhanced for the sound to take center stage, thus the title Sonic Pavilion. Two holes pierce the center of the room. One hole in the ceiling cuts through to allow a shaft of light that forms a circle on the floor, and it moves around throughout the day as the sun moves. The hole on the floor represents the heart of the project. The viewer can only see its beginning, rimmed with steel, inscribed with the artist's name, the name of the installation, and, quote, hole depth, 202 meters, 663 feet. The inscription refers to the 1 mile deep hole burrowed into the hilltop, through which Aitken and his assistant lowered geomicrophones and accelerometers in order to amplify the sounds of the Earth's interior, its rotation, and the shifting of seismic plates. The resulting sound is conditioned by chance, ranging from a low, steady rumble to the sporadic, higher pitch moment of friction. The sounds are amplified and emitted through 8 hidden speakers placed around the room. From the center point, the visitor can turn on their own axis and in the process gain a clear, transparent, continuous view of the panoramic landscape outside. The glass walls are covered with a membrane, and it's only when you stand at this point and view in one direction that you can see a clear image of the landscape. So you have to keep turning around on your own axis. Before concluding my presentation, I want to describe a site-specific artwork that qualifies as installation art, since it creates an immersive outdoor environment. And it also qualifies as a site-specific artwork because it foregrounds the very substance of the landscape as the primary material. Brazilian, Minas born, Marilla Dardot's The Origin of the Work of Art of 2002 exemplifies these processes. First exhibited in the artist solo exhibition at the Pampulha Art Museum, which I mentioned before, The Origin of the Work of Art was installed at Inhotim as the Marilla Dardot Gallery in 2011, the design for which Dardot was directly involved. That is, the structure she was also directly involved in. The constituent parts of the installation invite the viewer to build words and sentences with earthenware pots shaped in the form of letters and filled with soil, seedlings, and mature plants that visitors have themselves sowed. Like the plant life, the installation constantly changes and evolves as visitors add pots or move them around. The so-called gallery structure was designed without walls, windows, or doors to serve as a planting studio open to the landscape where the visitor finds gardening tools, soil, and seeds. The integration of the artwork with nature and its environs is multivalent. The installation is situated on an old pasture land in the western portion of Inhotim. The seeds are collected from 12 native species. The red clay is locally derived from Minas' iron-rich soil, and the initial 1,500 planting pots were handmade in Inhotim by women from the surrounding communities. Here you can see a collage of these aspects. In conclusion, Matthew Barney's Dilama Lamina and Inhotim's ecological turn. In conclusion, I discussed Matthew Barney's Dilama Lamina 2009 installation for two reasons. First, it summarizes the two axes I have presented for tracing Inhotim's curatorial aesthetic trope for unifying art, architecture, and nature. That is, artworks mirroring nature and site-specific art. Second, it provides an epilogue to my presentation that reflects a third axis in Inhotim's latter-day ecological turn. By now, you will be familiar with the purposeful reflective glass cladding of the architectural pavilion that houses Dilama Lamina. Set within a eucalyptus forest clearing, you will also notice its unique shape, a geodesic dome made of glass and steel. In line with Barney's environmental concerns, the clearing for the pavilion involved the removal of only 7 trees, so that the site is quite rough compared to the other pavilion sites. And while the paths leading to these other pavilions are paved with flagstone or gravel and bordered by manicured foliage, the path to Barney's installation is iron-rich soil native to the mining region. For this project, Barney worked with the architect of Oiticica's Magic Square, Paula Zaznikov. Inside the dome, a mud-encrusted tractor takes center stage under the now transparent geodesic dome, allowing both the visitor and tractor to be in dialogue with the forest setting. Yet it is shocking to see this monstrous tractor under skylined ceiling with claws that bite and suspend in the air a completely white tree cast in polyethylene. Upon closer examination of the tree, we can also discern other polyethylene cast objects entangled in the tree roots and branches, knives, sabers, tools for harvesting, and other sharp instruments used for deforestation. In the uppermost register, tree limbs morph into human fingers holding a cat's cradle or the polygonal atomic structure that we are familiar with from physics. What does all this mean in relation to the title of the work? To answer this question, we should review the original context of the tractor truck in Barney's 2004 Carnival performance in Baha'i titled Dilama Lamina. What is important here is the mythology that connects to the motifs embedded in the tree. And I quote from the Inhotim's website. The work's title, From Mud, a Blade, refers to two deities in the Brazilian candomblé of African roots. Osanya, the Orisha of plant life and ruler of nature's vital forces, and Ogun, Orisha of iron, warfare, and technology. The conflict between these two deities provides an organizing principle for the work and reflects Barney's keen interest on the dialectic of apparently opposing elements, unquote. The artists address these issues in the tractor ensemble, specifically the link between creation and destruction, both in the ecological and sociological realms. As noted in Inhotim's description, the tractor is a forestry truck, and together with its muddy incrustation, it presents a familiar sight encountered on the roads that lead to Inhotim, which I personally experienced several times. Given Inhotim's location in the middle of the nation's forestry and mining district, Barney's tractor trailer reminds us that Brazil's economic fortunes and misfortunes are dependent on the natural environment and the population that harvests the natural resources. The polished concrete floor, marked by ore brought in by the soles of visitors' shoes, is another reminder of the roads that lead to Inhotim. They are pockmarked and eroded by the tractors and trucks that transport these resources. Anyone traveling on these roads to Inhotim will be covered in dust that these heavy, monstrous vehicles stir up. Upon leaving the installation, we can reflect upon the forest that the building mirrors. Accordingly, curators writing about Dalama Lamina for the Inhotim Google Arts and Culture site attest, quote, in its addressing both the deforestation and the fragile balance between the natural environment and technology, the work also conveys a political content, unquote. That political acknowledgement is a new direction for Inhotim and points directly to its most recent ecological turn, a direction I discovered in the process of writing this presentation. It is on this note that I offer my final perspective on reframing contemporary art at Inhotim. When I was invited to deliver the presentation and review Inhotim through the lens of nature, I embarked on a virtual, digital, and critical return to Inhotim. In the process, I discovered a shift in Inhotim's own identity from a global model for contemporary art museums to a global model for environmental research and revitalization. Since I am neither a scholar of eco-criticism nor environmental studies, I've introduced this shift by tracing Inhotim's original aesthetic trope to its current ecological turn. In the spirit of letting Inhotim speak for itself in its renewed vision of its art plus nature alliance, I cite two program developments. In 2015, Inhotim initiated a project titled Inhotim Global Change in partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank, which in 2017 became an art exhibition entitled Inhotim at the Crossroads of Local Change, Global and Local. This exhibition combined artworks and technological experiences and proposed new perspectives on climate change and biodiversity conservation. The physical exhibition was held in Washington, D.C., while a digital exhibition was simultaneously launched on Google Arts and Culture, where it is still viewable. And finally, it was recently announced on the Inhotim website that they are launching a 2021-22 project titled Specific Territory, celebrating its 15th anniversary in 2021. Inhotim poses the question, how does the relationship with its territory shape the history, the present, and the projected future of the institution? And this territory is both local and global. Here I summarize their initiatives from the website. Quote, artists, researchers, scientists, and the audience are invited to think about the relation of institutions with their surroundings, the role played by art in the local and global territories, in addition to the potentialities of a museum and botanical gardens for the future, faced with issues that we are currently confronting as a society, unquote. And these issues include research and conservation of seeds and species that might provide for the sustainable future of the institution, and the commissioning and construction of site-specific works that continue to address the dialogue between art, architecture, and nature at Inhotim. Please feel free to discuss these issues in the Q&A session on October 26th. And perhaps we can learn from each other more about Inhotim as an eco-critical art museum. And with that, I say, obrigada. And I'll stop sharing so I can say, obrigada, ciao. and I'll see you on the 26th. Thank you.